Welcome back to the Retirement Planning MadeEasy.com YouTube channel and podcast show where we talk about retirement planning issues and make things simplified so that you can focus on the stuff that's most important and get rid of all the noise that's out there. If this is your first time here, I'm your host, Chris Hammond, and today I'm going to talk about the thing that people need to focus on when they're saving money for retirement and knowing when they are going to be ready to retire. So that's a really big decision. When you are still working and you're getting close to that point, you're seeing a lot of your coworkers around you are retiring. You're having those retirement parties for them, eating the cake, and they're about your same age. And you're wondering, well, when's going to be the right time for me to retire? When's the time where I'm going to be financially ready to do this? Well, one of the things that people focus on a lot of times when they are planning for their retirement is a target retirement savings goal. So that would be where, and there used to be a commercial about this where there were people, they would walk around and they would have this orange number above their head, and that would be like where they are at, where their savings are, and or maybe they're carrying it under their arm when they're carrying their briefcase on the other arm, and they'd walk around thinking about their number and have they reached the right number before they're able to retire. Well, that's probably not the most optimal way to be thinking about things when it comes to your retirement. There's two ways you can look at this. Target retirement savings goal, that's where you're targeting that, like, I have to have $1 million, I have to have $2 million, I have to have whatever it is saved up in my 401k before I'm able to retire. You have that way of thinking. And then you also have a way of thinking that thinks about cash flow planning. And so we're going to jump into that deeper here. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about target retirement savings goal. This is where you are focusing on this specific number. And for you, you may have a different number in your mind. You probably do have a different number in your mind than what your next door neighbor has or what your coworker has. But it's where you're thinking, like, I need to have $1 million before I'm financially ready to retire. So the question you ask is, well, where did that number come from? It may be just a comfort number. It's something that you have in your head and think like, well, surely this would give me a big cushion, be way more than enough, and I'm not going to have to worry about anything again. It's also possible that the number may not be big enough. Maybe that number you think is big enough, and maybe it's not. That would be kind of the flip side of this, where people think they're focusing on the number and they think it's got that extra margin of protection in it, but it's always possible that it's not enough. That's something you have to consider. Now, that aside for now, because we're going to jump into cash flow planning. One of the downsides of targeting a certain savings goal for retirement is that your mental well-being is oftentimes tied to how well the portfolio is doing today. So you may be at that goal that you've reached $1 million, and you're thinking, I can retire now. It's okay for me to retire. I've reached my goal. I'm good to go. And then you may have a year like 2008 that occurs, and you may lose 25% of your portfolio value that year. Or you may have another COVID-19 situation hit where the market goes down a huge amount in a very short time frame. So you're thinking, I'm okay to retire, and then boom, it goes down. And then just using that example from 2020, it actually rebounded rather quickly. You would have probably come out, if you never touched your portfolio or made any changes, would have probably come out with more money at the end of the year. But mentally, when that goes down and it goes below your target number, that's going to make you more anxious and nervous. And then when it actually comes back over the target number again, that's probably not going to make you feel more relaxed. Like, okay, it is good. Everything's safe. I can retire. It's probably going to make you think like, I remember what happened, and I think I need even more money. My target retirement goal shouldn't have been 1 million. It should have been 1.2 million. And you start focusing on that. And really your financial well-being and the way you think about money, the way you think about your own retirement and how ready you are for it can get tied to just how the market is doing on any particular day. Not a very fun place to be. And especially, let's say you're already retired. Now the decision's not whether I should just keep working to get that portfolio up to that bigger margin of safety instead of 1 million, keep working till it's 1.2. Now you may be in a situation where it's like, now I'm really worried because I'm already retired. I can't go back to work. Maybe they've already filled my position, and that focus on the number can be very worrisome. So what's another way of looking at this? Well, you can look at it from a cash flow planning perspective. Now, what that does is that focuses on the income that you need in retirement. All right. And that's going to be a function of what your regular expenses are that you spend just to keep your household going. And that'd be like your necessity spending. And then maybe some expenses you put on top of that that are going to be for things that are not necessary, but they're the things that make life a lot more fun. They're the things that made it why you wanted to retire in the first place, to do those extra things like taking the grandkids on the Disney cruise, stuff like that. So you need to think about, with cash flow planning, what type of income do I need to meet the lifestyle that I want? That's going to take into consideration your income sources like Social Security, pension. And I believe I did a video last week that talked about reasons of when to claim Social Security. You may be in one of those situations where it doesn't make sense to retire right away and claim early right away on Social Security because you're looking at this cash flow planning angle and you're saying, well, I need more income coming in to cover the expenses that I have going out. But you're going to look at your income, your expenses, and for a lot of people, their expenses may be right here, but their Social Security and pension may be around here. And that means you have this gap that occurs. And the gap has to be filled somewhere. Probably going to be filled from taking withdrawals from your savings accounts, from your 401k, from your investment portfolio, those types of things. And so when you look at a cash flow planning perspective, you're looking at more information and you're taking more of a holistic approach to this. Now, the importance is on maintaining the lifestyle that you want. And what's very interesting about the cash flow planning is that it's going to impact how you should invest your portfolio and what type of allocations into stocks and bonds and any other types of assets that you're going to invest in. The cash flow planning perspective will take that into account, because what it's going to do is say, if you need to start taking some withdrawals from your portfolio on a regular basis, maybe it doesn't make sense at that point in your life to be 100% invested in equities, taking a lot of risk that your portfolio goes up and down, all while having to make withdrawals from it. So imagine a scenario like 2008, for instance, an all equity portfolio, just kind of looking at the S&P 500, was down about 50% in that 1 year alone. Well, if you are actively taking withdrawals from that, and your portfolio has halved, and say you were starting out with a 4% withdrawal, which is the safe withdrawal rule, right? 4%. If your portfolio gets cut in half, that same 4% you were taking out is actually now an 8% withdrawal. And if you're doing that, even though there's a rebound in the following years, 2009, 2010, 2011, it still hasn't got back to broke even yet, and you're still making these withdrawals. So the cash flow planning perspective looks at this and says, maybe this portfolio is too risky because we already can see that your Social Security and pension are here, your expenses are here. We know you're going to have to take some withdrawals from your portfolio. And so we have to do something to make sure that it is allocated properly. So an illustration that I use from time to time is this illustration of what we call Hans and Franz. Kind of a throwback to the old Saturday Night Live skit with Dana Carvey and Kevin Nealon, where they're the big muscle builder guys that talk with an Austrian accent and that whole thing. Now, Oh, if you're listening to this on the podcast, I'm going to walk you through this verbally. If you guys are watching it on the YouTube channel, you can just follow along on the screen. But Hans is at the top of the screen. Franz is at the bottom. They both start out with $1 million, but they start out and they're each going to withdraw 50,000 from their $1 million portfolio every year. Now, Hans has a portfolio that has an average return of 8%. So over the long haul, he's going to earn 8% long term. Now, what happens in the years in between? The portfolio will be variable, just like markets. Markets fluctuate, they go up, they go down. But over the long term, his portfolio is going to have an average 8% rate of return. Whereas Franz is not taking as much risk. His portfolio has an average return of 6%. Well, you'd say Hans definitely has the better portfolio than Franz because he has a higher rate of return. But things change up a bit when you start to get to in retirement and you start taking withdrawals from your portfolio. When you start taking withdrawals, it becomes important that this other factor in your portfolio is also managed properly. And in that case, it's called a standard deviation. You don't have to go know all the details or how the math works. If you've taken a statistics class in the past, you've probably already forgotten it all, and that's okay. But the higher your standard deviation is, this is the takeaway. The higher your standard deviation is, the more your portfolio value swings higher and lower in the market. Long term, it may have a higher rate of return than another one, but it's going to swing a lot more in the market. Now, in this example, Hans has a very high volatility, a standard deviation of 23, whereas Franz has a very low one of 5. Now, what's interesting as you watch the withdrawals and the values and what happens is that you can see with Hans in the first year, he takes out his 50,000. But then since he's got a very volatile portfolio, it goes down 13%, and he's now down in the 800,000 range. The next year, he takes out another 50,000, but his portfolio goes down 20% that next year. So now he's in the $661,000 range. And then the third year takes out another 50,000. He has some modest growth of 5%, but he's still not in the 700s yet. He's at 694,000. And so it goes on and on. Now you see in the later years, and for you podcast listeners, I'm just going to tell you, in the later years, Hans starts to get some really good rates of return to help build him back up. And he ends the 10th year with an ending value of $908,000. Not so bad. But what happened when those first few years were occurring and he was taking those big losses in the first years, he was still withdrawing that 50,000. And so that 50,000 was not all the withdrawals, the 50,000 withdrawals he took during that time, they were not still there to experience that growth of the later years where he starts having 25% annual growth, 45% annual growth, 30% annual growth. And the last 10th year, he had 20% annual growth. It's all because the withdrawals were occurring. If he were not taking withdrawals, he would have ended the year better than his friend Franz. So let's look at Franz. Franz has returns that are much more consistent. They're not all over the place. So when he takes out 50,000 in the first year and he gets a 6% rate of return, he actually ends up with a little bit over $1 million, $1,007,000. The next year he takes out another 50,000, but he got an 8% return. So now he's at $1,087,000. The next year, he takes out another 50,000, but he had a 7% return and then an 11% return. Now he starts getting a few negative percent returns in year 5 and then another one in year 8, but it all still averages out to an average rate of return of 6%. It's just his returns are very narrow. They're more consistent. And the end result is that Franz, who had a portfolio that grew less than Hans, he actually ends up with more money, $1.2 million, whereas Hans ended up with $908,000. So looking at a cash flow perspective, that takes these scenarios into consideration. Because now if you know that you need a certain level of income withdrawals that you're pulling from your portfolio, that's going to have an impact on how you invest that portfolio, the types of risk and volatility that you're comfortable taking in that portfolio. The more volatile it is and the bigger your withdrawals, the more at risk you are that you might actually run out of money in retirement, or more likely what would probably happen is that you would cut back on your spending and then wonder, why is my retirement not as good as I thought it was going to be? Because now I'm having to watch every single dollar that comes in because of how my portfolio has performed in my earlier years of retirement. Not a fun place to be. So target retirement savings goal, that's the first option where you're just looking at that, hitting your number. Cash flow planning. One takeaway from this is that they are related. Okay. They're not, it's not where you just think of only one and not the other. They are related. The bigger your portfolio gets, so if you have a target savings goal of 2 million, well, the bigger that is, the more income that can potentially support for you in retirement, especially if you allocate it properly for your withdrawal needs. So they are related. We don't want to take away from that. The thing that I want you to take away from this is that cash flow planning incorporates a more holistic picture of your finances. So it's looking at things like your income, like your Social Security, your pension, any other income sources that you may have in retirement. It looks at your expenses and think of that as my expenses are what it requires me to spend every month to maintain my lifestyle. It takes a look at that as well. It looks at the difference between your income sources, Social Security, pension, and those expenses, and it sees what that spending gap is. And that helps you to have guidance on how you should allocate your portfolio in retirement so that you can have enough income coming in, not be taking more risk than is necessary or making bad decisions, trying to maximize returns on your portfolio without also considering what risk and volatility, the ups and downs that risk is going to translate into in your portfolio. So the big key takeaway with this is think about the two different ways to look at you being prepared for retirement. If it's just a target savings goal, you're not really seeing the whole picture. You need to think about a total cash flow planning goal that's incorporating other aspects of your financial situation. And to also get personalized advice before deciding anything. Have an objective review of your financial situation be done. People in our industry call that having a financial plan. What that is it's an objective review of your financial situation that incorporates what your Social Security benefit's going to be, your pension, what your tax situation is going to be, how your investments should be allocated when you retire, all that kind of stuff. Very important. And if you need additional help planning for your retirement, head on over to retirementplanningmadeeasy.com. You can download a free copy of our essential step-by-step retirement guide that's actually going to walk you through and give you a template where you can put in things to help track your expenses and understand what your income levels are going to be, where you can input that, like your Social Security amounts, your pensions, all that stuff that's so important. Head on over there, retirementplanningmadeeasy.com, and request a copy. We will immediately email that out to you. And until the next video, y'all have a good one. Thanks for watching.